Hello and welcome to the ACCA SBL preparation program offered by the EY Academy of Business. Today's webinar is dedicated to the part D of the syllabus, and we will discuss the identification, assessment and measurement of risk. So what is the risk? Companies do not operate in a vacuum. They operate in rapidly changing business environment, and there is an uncertainty about the future events. And this uncertainty may either have a positive or negative effect on the achievement of the company's objectives. So risk is an opportunity, a possibility that something may go not in accordance to the initial plan that may prevent the company from achieving its objectives. And you need to bear in mind the fact that risks and return are interrelated. There is a direct correlation between these two factors. So the higher the risk, the higher the anticipated return. But when we talk about the risks being faced by the company, we need to bear in mind that each and every company has specific risks, specific to its industry, specific to its business, specific to its way of doing business. So whenever we are making a list of risks, we need to think about it in a way: how can this particular risk affect this particular objective? For example, if your objective was to go to the picnic outside, well, then rain is a risk. But if your objective was to stay home, well, then rain is not a risk. So whenever we talk about the risks, we need to be very precise. We need to think about it in a way: can it have an effect on the achievement of company's objectives? What are the steps involved in risk management? Well, the first step is dedicated to the identification of risk. Well, identification of risks is basically making a list of potential risks applicable to the company. This can be done by the means of brainstorming, questionnaires, interviews. So we need to sort of sit down and think about it in a way: what can possibly go wrong so that the company cannot achieve its initial goal. The second step would be the assessment of risks. So not only it is important to identify the potential risks faced by the company, but also to assess the impact and the likelihood of this risk. Based on the assessment of risks can be ranked. So we will have some kind of prioritized risk list. Upon the completion of the risk assessment, company can then decide on the appropriate risk mitigating actions. So either the company avoids the risks or it transfers shares. So variety of mitigating actions available for the risk management purposes. Not only it is important to adopt appropriate risk management techniques, it is also important to monitor risks. And this is due to the fact that the internal and external business environment changes on the daily basis. And probably the risks that were not applicable at the beginning are now becoming very relevant, and vice versa. Who is responsible for the risk management system? Well, management is. Management is responsible for establishing effective, up-to-date risk management system, which is integrated in the company's daily business activities. It's not a separate function within the company. Why companies need to manage risk? Well, first of all, we need to consider the fact that the objective of risk management is not to eliminate the risks completely. Because when you eliminate the risk, you eliminate the opportunities as well. Because if you eliminate the risk, you have a guarantee of something happening the way you want it to happen. And this is the way for preventing the company from growing, from developing, from expanding. So the objective of risk management is to minimize the risks to appropriately low level. So there is a principle called as low as reasonably practicable. So think about it in a way: we do have a list of risks, and these risks, without any risk management actions applied to it, is called the inherent risk. But once mitigating actions were developed and implemented, the inherent risks becomes the residual risk. But bear in mind that this residual risk may either be equal to the target residual risk that the company initially wanted to achieve, or it may differ from the target. So once management actions have been applied to minimize the risks to appropriately low level, we need to consider the level of the residual risk and to discuss whether we need to apply additional risk management actions or whether the residual risk fits within our company's risk appetite. So risk assessment, we need to assess the risks from two perspectives. First, we need to think about the likelihood of the risk occurrence. So we need to answer the question, how likely it is that this risk will materialize? And again, this would be the subjective opinion of management, and it can be measured in various ways. We can think about it in a way of a certain, for example, time period, saying that it is highly likely that this risk will occur within 1 year or 2 years and 3 years and so on. Depending on this time frame, we will then measure the likelihood of risk occurring. Or we can measure it in terms of percentage. Why not? Another important aspect of risk assessment relates to the potential impact of the risk. Here we need to answer the question, what if this risk happens? How severe its impact will be on the company's strategy, on the company's objectives. The severity can be measured, for example, in monetary terms, or in terms of the time the company will need to recover from the risk that have occurred. And the longer the period, the more severe the risk. And only from the two perspectives combined together, we can then arrive at the joint assessment of the risk, because some risks may have low likelihood of occurrence but high impact, or vice versa, high likelihood of occurrence and low impact, and then they will have some medium risk assessment metric at the end. Once risks have been assessed in terms of their likelihood of occurrence and their potential impact, we can use the model called the risk map. Well, the risk map helps us to visualize the severity of the risk. On one side, you have the likelihood from remote to probable, and normally it is a scale from 1 to 5. And then on the other side, we have the potential impact of risk occurrence from negligible to extreme. We will then put the specific risk that we are assessing on some area of the map. Once we have identified and assessed the risk and placed them on the risk map, we can then develop appropriate risk management techniques. We can use TARA or SARA framework that can help us to come with the idea as to how to minimize the risk to acceptably low level. And T relates to transfer to the third party or share the risk with someone else. A, accept. So normally these would be the risks with a low likelihood of occurrence and low potential impact. Reduce the risk. A, avoid the risk. Normally the risks that are avoided by companies appearing on the red area of the map, meaning that it has high likelihood of occurrence or high potential impact or both. And there is another P that can come along with the TARA model. And P relates to the risk management strategy that is called pursue. So sometimes the companies take on additional risks in pursuit of their objectives. But normally, even though the company take additional risks, these risks will still be below the predetermined risk appetite. How to quantify the risks? Well, we have lots of tools that can help us to put a measure on the risk. We can use the scenario planning that will help us to ask the question, what if? What if this happens? What can go wrong? And on the regular basis, companies have numbers of scenarios, but they classify them into 3 major categories: the most probable scenario, the pessimistic scenario, and optimistic scenario. We can use the sensitivity analysis, and as opposed to scenario planning, which allow us to change number of factors within there, sensitivity analysis can only be considered in the context of one factor affecting the achievement of companies' objectives. So it means that if we're saying that company is sensitive to this particular factor, we mean that the small change in this factor can then result in significant changes in the company's overall objective. If we have multiple decisions for example, the sequence of decisions, each and every decision within that sequence depends on the previously made decision, we can use the decision trees that can help us visualize the sequence of different decisions and their potential outcomes. We can use computer simulations, we can use software packages for analyzing the existing data. The dynamic nature of risks. Well, as I have mentioned, companies do not operate in vacuum. They are operating in rapidly changing business environments. And these changes happen both internally and externally. And risks are changing. They are appearing and disappearing. They are migrating on the map. So we need to keep an eye on the way the risk changes. And we need to monitor and update our risk registers, risk maps, and other risk-related documents within the company. So how does the risk register looks like? Well, a risk register is the document that provides us with the list of risks relevant to the company. It begins with the title of the risk. Then two next steps will be related to the assessment of the risk in terms of its likelihood of occurrence and the potential impact the risk has. Then the risk owner. Who is the risk owner? It is a manager or a director of the business unit to which this particular risk that we discussed relates. The date when the risk was assessed last time, and the mitigating actions, if any, were recommended for the risk management. COSO is the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations, and this committee provides us with very interesting best practice recommendations in the field of risk management and internal control. And the cube you see on your slide is called the COSO ERM model, so Enterprise Risk Model, published in 2013. But please bear in mind that in 2017, COSO published a new integrated risk management model, which is available on the COSO website. It has a more strategic focus. And if you are interested in this particular area of the syllabus and you need to generate ideas, well, I advise you to go to the COSO website and have a look at their publications. They are available and they are very interesting, and they will definitely widen your outlook in the area of risk. And I think that will be very beneficial for your SBL exam. Anyway, what is now in the syllabus of the SBL paper is still this model published in 2013, and this cube helps us to think about the risk management as an integrated part of the daily business, not a separate function. And on the top side of the cube, you see the company's objectives: strategic, operations, reporting, and compliance. On the face, you can see the components of the risk management model. And it has the internal environment, objective setting, risk assessment. So you have several components. And on the side, you see different levels of the company. And the reason why this cube is being sliced is because each and every slide must be covered by, for example, each and every objective must be present at every level of the company and must contain all the risk management model components. And only once all the components are present at every level and they are functioning interrelated, only then can risk management be deemed effective in the company. We will now move on to making exam-style practice questions relating to the topics that we have just covered.